Hello, everybody, to the BIDE podcast, the podcast of the Barcelona International Dance Exchange. Today, in our chapter number 34, we have the lucky to have a moment with Israel Aloni. Israel is a choreographer from Israel, and he's based in Sweden, and he have a very strong and really nice background in dance. So we'll be talking with him. So thank you, Israel, to be with us, and welcome to the BIDE podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So we start our chatting with our guest, just always asking what bag bite you when you was young to pursue this career in dance. So how was your bite? When we say, okay, I mean, I feel that the contemporary dance can be a place for me.
Interesting question. Well, already from the introduction, I think there's a lot of questions. So I guess I would ask myself and maybe you and the listeners, who should answer this question? Is it the child who started dancing many years ago, or the adult who can sort of look back and reflect and sort of interpret what happened? I think the child was just, I was a dancing child. I started dancing before I probably knew the word dance. There's like home footage where I just played music and moved the furnitures around and just dance, just move the body. The body kind of knew that it wanted and needed to move. And I was an odd child. It's interesting, when I hear how people present me, like where I sort of come across as where I'm from, for example. But I think that the dance for me was something that helped me connect and find way to introduce myself to the cultures that my family is actually from. So it's true, I was born in Israel, but my mom's family are from Turkey, and my father's family came to Israel from Iran and Uzbekistan. And these are cultures that are not very familiar to me. But I feel that also in my dance and even in these home videos that I referred to earlier, the kind of music that I used to play and dance to is used to be music from these places. So I don't know. I think it wasn't very conscious. It's a very silly story. I went to see my sister dance. My sister used to dance, and I think my parents didn't have a babysitter one day. And just asked the teacher if I could sit and watch. And I was very young. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I was mesmerized by this thing, like people dancing together, because up until that moment I was just dancing on my own. And I asked if I can join. So when my father came to pick my sister up, I was actually in the group dancing, and this is kind of how it started. But as I grew older, I think movement is something that has become very prominent, very strong in my life in many ways. I identify as a fluid being. So my gender is fluid, and I say that even my nationality, my national identity is fluid. It depends on where I am and who I talk to. I feel I come from different nationality. My age, my chronological identity is fluid depending on the situation. I feel that I'm at a different age. So I think the adult self would say that it was very much about flow and movement and change and intimacy with oneself that kind of pulled me into dance before I even understood what I was doing.
Great. And when was the time that you decided to go serious with all this fantastic reflection that you you just shared with us. Say, okay, what was the driving force to go further and deeper?
I think generally it was quite organic. I think I was doing it, and then I got the immediate feedback, both from myself, I was really enjoying it, and then people around me, teachers and directors, and I was kind of assisted. I was kind of pulled from one context to the other. People were kind of inviting me to to join something a little bit more serious, a little bit more professional, a little bit more full-time, one step after the other. It was kind of like a few years that I did it as a hobby, but somehow people saw me perform or something like this, and then got in touch with me or my parents and suggested that I would go to another environment. But I think the biggest step was when I decided to go to High School of the Arts. I went to a school called Elin in Israel. It's right on the border between Tel Aviv and another city called Givatayim. And it's a quite well-known school in Israel. So people from all over the country move to attend this school. So even though it's just a high school, so people the age of 14 to 18. But it's a little bit like a greenhouse for people who are quite serious about their art from a young age. So everybody who is at that school is majoring in arts. So we had dance, theater, classical music, jazz music, visual arts. So everybody is an artist. It's quite a small school in comparison to other high schools in the country. So there's also quite immediate, direct, and individual sort of relationship with the students. And we were taken very seriously by the teachers, by the faculty. Looking back, I remember these days with a lot of respect, actually, to our teachers who really treated us like adults. They respected our art. It wasn't something we were doing on the side. It was something equally important to our academic studies, if not even more. I think a lot of us excelled in our art, and that kind of helped us to survive the academic studies. And I think that was it, because there was no time to slack. There was no tolerance of taking things easy or not being serious about the art, not from the establishment, not from the school, and not from the peers. Actually, the people in my class, I remember, it wasn't so much of a competition as much as encouragement. We were really encouraging each other to just go far. And from a young age, we were 15, 16 years old. We already thought of ourselves as professionals. We knew that we were going to do it. And I think in my dance group, we were maybe 16 people, 14 people. I think 10 of us are still working in dance. 25 years later, we're still doing it. So I think that step, the decision to go to another city, I had to be on the bus for an hour and a half every morning. We started studies at 7:30 in the morning. So, getting out of the house at 6 o'clock in the morning every day for 3 years, and then coming home at around midnight, because after school we had to rehearse and, take some extra ballet classes. And so it was just very, very demanding. And I think the fact that I took that on and persevered, I stayed for 3 years. I think that was the period in my life when I realized that it's more than just something I like to do. This is actually something that is going to encompass my entire life. And
also, I don't know if you agree, but Israel is have a super vibrant dance scene, and for me, that I went there many times, looks like maybe you from the inside give us another perspective, but looks like it's a very motivated place to be. When you want to pursue this career. What is your take about this?
To be honest, it's a very enigmatic phenomena. Like I keep asking myself, I left Israel when I was 18 years old, so that's 20 years ago now. And sometimes both myself, I kind of ponder, I think, what is it about that place that makes it so vibrant in terms of contemporary dance? And also I get that question time and time again. And even though I've lived outside of Israel longer than I've lived in Israel, and like I said, I'm just second generation Israeli, so my cultural references are actually going further than Israel. I'm still referred to as an Israeli artist. People kind of speak about how there's Israeli elements in the art that I make. And what is it? I think, like I said, I went to that very particular school. Back then, there were maybe 3 schools like this in the country on that sort of level of seriousness and intensity. Now there's many more, actually. Israel has a very good system. How to combine academic studies and art studies in high school. I think the level that we finished high school on is, in many cases, actually more sufficient than BA programs in many universities around the world that I've been teaching in. In terms of references, in terms of practice, in terms of network, because the people that we worked with, we had our teachers, but also a lot of choreographers, working choreographers, came to work with us, whether it was workshops or it was in creation processes. And I think also the fact that there are companies like Batsheva and the Kibbutz Company and Vertigo and in Bal Pinto and Avshalom Pollack had a company then. I think you grow up seeing that it's possible to have a career. You see that it's possible. And the people in these companies are people who went to these schools that I'm talking about. So you see that there's a direct connection. It's not detached. It's not separate. The education and the professional field are the education for dance and the professional dance field are very connected. The artists who are working professionally are the teachers in the schools. So it's very easy to make that jump because you know the people, you've seen them perform, they've taught you, you've danced their rep. Every school in Israel has rep from repertory classes from the major choreographers. You are 18 years old, you finish high school, so you've already done something by Ohad Narbin, you've already done something by Rami Be'er, you've already done something by, now it's Sharon Eyal and Noah Tzuk. And so you already experienced it in your body. And also, you've had a lot of Israeli artists who live abroad come to Israel for the summer. So when you do summer programs in Israel, you also experience a lot of international rep. So you know what's going on in other companies. And I'm speaking before internet, before YouTube, before smartphones. So this is how we stayed connected.
When it happens and how what type of impact come back to you when you left Israel, and also not why, but what was again the driving force to tell you, okay, Israel, I need to go back, I need to go out, and of course I want to go back later about your role as an educator, that you also have a strong path in that way. So what was the next back that said to Israel, okay, I need to leave my country, and where this decision take you?
Yeah, why leave Israel? I think it's both personal and professional. From a young age, I knew that I wanted to leave. Israel has a lot of wonderful things in it, but also has a lot of awful things in it, the country. And I think, despite everything that I said, it's still financially very difficult to make a decent living in Israel as an artist, particularly as a contemporary dance artist. There's a wonderful dynamic within the field, but between the field and the rest of society, it's still, I don't know actually how it is at the moment, but back then it was very difficult. So I knew that if I wanted to make a decent living, if I wanted to earn money from being a dancer, I probably need to go abroad. And also back then, and I mean, we know it from everywhere around the world, the idea was that if you want to make it as a dancer, you need to go and get a contract with a major company. So I was offered a contract with the Gothenburg Opera Dance Company when I was 18 years old. And to get that opportunity, you know, you don't ask questions, you pack your bag and leave.
Yes. And you were super young, you know. So
yeah, and it was already my third company. I started dancing when I did my last year at school. I already did a project with the Israel Ballet. So I was very young. I was 16 years old. Then I did 1 year with the Kibbutz company when I was 17. And then I moved to Gothenburg. So, you know, I did my gradual steps in Israel. And so I moved to Gothenburg. And I think
how was this change, you know, from being in Israel and move to Gothenburg, that is a total different city, total different weather, I have to say, and total different society kind of dynamic.
Yeah. I have a lot to say. On one hand, it was, you know, like arriving at the gates of heaven, because you go, it's the people who don't know, the Gothenburg Opera Dance Company is a rep company working inside a large opera house in Sweden. So the social conditions, the work conditions, the physical conditions, you know, everything is just so great. You know, you're getting really well paid. The system is taking care of you. You're protected by union. You know, you have your, you know, we were maximum four people in a dressing room with 2 showers in each room. It's just like this. You're feeling like you're being appreciated, like you're taken seriously. So in this sense, it was amazing. And again, we're speaking 20 years ago, and I know that I'm not very old, but it's a very different era, because when you worked at the Gothenburg Opera Dance Company in the early 2000s, you were kind of the topic of town, you know, like people recognized us, and, you know, our faces were on posters, and, you know, it wasn't social media. People had a billion followers from all over the world. We were the people that people talked about, you know, we were the cool people, the international people. So in that sense, it was incredible. At the same time, I came from the Kibbutz company, which is a contemporary dance company, and the Gothenburg Opera Dance Company back then was sort of still in the transition from neoclassical to contemporary. So there were a lot of things in both the operation of the company, in terms of hierarchies, in terms of dynamics, in terms of what's the role of a dancer, but also in terms of aesthetic, in terms of approach. You know, I came from like dancing pretty much bare feet, climbing on walls, you know, like tough, to suddenly having to wear tights again and like work on my pirouettes, because I had to do pirouettes and double tour on like all of these classical things. And then ballet and partner, you know, female dancers on point, shoes, like all of these things, that it's also very different in that sense. So, but I was 18 years old, and I was hungry, and I was hardworking, and I was very grateful for the great things that I did experience. And it was in many ways an upgrade. You know, I think my salary was maybe like 4 times what I earned in the Kibbutz company. You know, I didn't have a dressing room at all in the Kibbutz company, you know, and then suddenly you basically having like this private. And like I said, also in Israel, society wasn't really appreciating contemporary dancers so much. And then I came to Gothenburg, and the company kind of is celebrities, or back then was in the city. So your social status also changed completely. So it was very mixed. You know, there were a lot of very great things. You know, the weather and things like this, it really didn't when you're 18 years old and you live in your dream.
No, come on. Yeah, weather is not a problem.
But I thought when I moved to Sweden, I was like, okay, I'll stay here for a couple of years and then I move on. And then I'm still here.
Yeah. 20 years later. Yes. No, I remember my first time that I working in Finland. That was in 2000, I think 10 or 11. I don't remember now. Was November and December, no? So there was telling me about how hard is the winter there, blah blah blah. I was working in Berlin. I mean, the weather is kind of rough during the the winter time before, but I remember I always take the same joke or the same story that I only saw the sun once, and because we was rehearsing at the one of the studios of the Theater Academy from Helsinki that have a fantastic view to the harbor, So one of the dancers put the alarm, and we was like the Simpsons, because the sun rise just for 30-40 seconds, So we all of us were saying so this is my only moment of sun in almost 2 months. But anyway, as you said, when you are young and also you are exposed to all this kind of experience and conditions, of course, weather is a second thought. So I want to ask you about this also this then I go back to Gothenburg because I want to talk about the ilDance that you are super involved. But also when you start this relationship also with Australia, that is another kind of planet, let's say. I just came back from Korea, and Australia, of course, they are English speaker, but it's another type of also of society organization. So when happens this relationship that with Australia that you also are really involved?
Yeah, I'll go a little bit back to give a little bit of context. So
yeah. Please.
In the beginning, I mentioned my fluid identity. And one of the things that actually is sort of a manifestation of this fluidity is the fact that I am a nomad. So I have very strong ties to Sweden and very strong ties to Gothenburg and to some other places as well. But I am personally a nomad. I don't think of myself as from a place. I am moving. I'm in movement. So in 2012, Lee Brummer, the co-director of ilDance, and myself, by that time, we had already known each other for about 15 years or something like this, because we know each other since we were children. And I invited Lee to Sweden to work with me when I was commissioned to make a large work, and she was my assistant. One thing led to the other. We decided to develop ilDance, which is basically an organization that could produce our work as well, because up to that point we were working only based on commissions in other organizations, and we wanted to be able to also influence the way in which the work is produced. So we wanted to think about the ethics and the values of how we put projects together, who we work with, etc. So we started ilDance in 2012. Around the same time, a friend of ours moved to live in Sydney, and we just wanted to go and visit. We were like, this is a great opportunity. But me being me, every time I go somewhere, I just do a lot of research. I'm really interested in the history of places, in the culture of places, in the economy of places. So I'm always doing a lot of research before I travel somewhere for the first time. And when I started researching Australia, I was like, this is very, very interesting. There's a lot of similarities to Sweden, even though it's the other corner of the world. So Lee and I were intrigued by this idea of how two corners of the world can be very similar in the way that they manifest. So one thing led to the other, and we started working in Australia. And in the beginning, we just went there twice a year, and then it became 4 times a year to work with a lot of different organizations in different parts of the continent. And then I was offered a job in Melbourne that I did for a while, and then I resigned because of let's say artistic disagreements with the directors of the organization that hired me there. And then I had some personal connections there. So yeah, until I kind of lived there in a way, but I never stopped being also the director of ilDance. But I only kind of lived there for maybe 4 years. And I never stopped being the director of ilDance, which meant that I was on the line between Europe and Australia. And I tried to only travel twice a year, not more, but then stay for 3 months at a time. So it meant that I was half here, half there. But then a lot of things happened. The COVID pandemic happened. My personal situation there changed. And Australia, again, is a place that has a lot of wonderful things about it. There's a lot of wonderful people there. There's a lot of wonderful creative force there. But there's also a lot of systemic, infrastructural, political challenges there that make it very difficult to move freely, to, this fluidity, liquidity, movement that I'm talking about. I felt that they're quite difficult, not because of the people that you meet on a daily basis, but actually the system in which you would try to do things.
Yeah.
So quite rigid in many ways. I mean, we can talk about Australian culture and political dynamics, but that's another topic maybe. Well, with ilDance, that's like I started saying, Lee and I wanted to direct or infuse the way in which we create the art as such into the way that we also organize the production or the creation of the art. We used to co-create. Lee and I used to make work together. And then over the years, we realized that there was also individual interest that was different from one another. So in the last few years, we've been mainly creating independently of one another, but working together and producing together. And we do a lot of different projects. So ilDance is a very broad organization that has kind of 6 different pillars. And one of them is the new productions, when we make new work and we produce and tour new work. The other one is a junior company. We started a junior company in 2013, which is actually to date is still the only junior company in Sweden that works and nationally. There's a few other attempts, but they're quite local, original. Our junior company, ilYoung, is the only one that actually goes out and sees audiences all across the country. And we have an international cooperation project called the International Contemporary Dance Collective, which is a context for research of collective methodologies and co-creation practices and negotiation of power dynamics within creative contexts.
Sorry to interrupt, but this because I want to ask you a few more things about ilDance, but because it's a fantastic project, and of course because we know each other from before, let's say is your baby, no? Of your Lee and it's your baby, and we have a lot of, point in contact with BIDE in a sense of of proposing and making things happen. But I want to ask you, sorry, before we go deeper into ilDance, to go a little bit backwards and also ask you when you decide and why you start to create your own pieces.
As soon as I graduated school, I think maybe it was a year that I didn't make work, but then the second year after graduation, I already made work. So I was 18 maybe or 19 when I started presenting choreographic work. So for me, dancing, I went very far and very deep with my dancing, the dancing part of my practice. I have been very privileged and I'm very grateful. I've worked with something like 70, 75 choreographers in my life. And it's been incredible, but also I made maybe 70 works in my life as a choreographer. And my practice has changed tremendously from back then when I was in my early 20s and I was presenting certain type of work, and to the kind of things that I'm interested in now. So for me, dancing and making work are not separate, but they're also not the same thing. So it's not, I don't feel like I can either dance or make. For me, I need both in order for the practice to be, in a way, whole. I took a break from performing myself for a while. I didn't perform myself for a few years, but I'm performing again now. Actually, my last work that I just made this year, I'm performing in it.
Super.
Yeah.
And how was this going back to the stage again after? Because I mean, you're super also pushing the ilDance project with all your guts and energy and soul. So how was the going to the stage again? Of course, enjoying, but how you felt the because I be doing the same next year. You know, I wasn't on stage the last 7 years because I was making my dance piece that asked me to be out. But next year I'll be doing something with a new piece with Teresia Björk, actually from Sweden also. And I wonder, you know, how can be for me if you go back. So also you can give me a bit of an advice, you know.
Well, the thing is that we never go back, huh? We continue going. And I think to meet the stage and to meet oneself as a performer on stage with this gap or distance, it's a completely new perspective for me. It was what matters is different. What matters as a performer is very different. In the years that I wasn't performing so much, actually, my practice, my movement practice and my choreographic practice, which is all under the title of the Aloni experience, it's deepened so much. And for me, the pandemic was an incredible opportunity to really study my own interests and go very deep with some ideas. So to meet this experience of performing again, it is really great because I feel a lot of the stress that I used to have as a performer is kind of gone. I feel that there's something very humbling, and there's a lot of humility in being vulnerable again. I find that it's so vulnerable for me to be there as a performer. And there's something about accepting my vulnerability and my imperfections and being honest and genuine with myself and with the spectator, with the participants. For me, it was really great. And also, I have to say, I'm so thankful for the physical experiences that I can still have, because I've experienced a lot of injuries in my dancing career when I danced for other people. And that's a whole other topic as well. But now when I dance with my older body, and I feel like I actually can go more extreme than I did when I was younger. And I think that letting go of the pressure to be something specific or something particular, the idea of what is a good performer that I gained through the gaze of other people telling me what to do, like being a dancer in other people's work. Now that this is gone, I think it really released the body and the mind in a performance mode. So there's much less pressure, there's much more freedom, there's much more humility and humbleness and gentleness. I feel like it's much more gentle, even if I go extreme. And if I go rough, it's at the same time accepting oneself and reaffirming oneself to oneself. So Yeah, for me it was great. I'm hoping that it will be great for you as well. And also you're working with Teresia, who is beautiful. So beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
being. So
Yeah.
I think you're gonna have fun.
Thank you so much. So going back to ilDance, ilDance already have 10 years, and a lot of
Yeah.
things happens. So I wonder how you feel the project since you and Lee imagine and say, okay, we want to do this, blah blah blah, and now with 10 years on their backs, it's quite a long path. How you feel about this wonderful project? Because something that I super like about it is your the space that you are giving back to the young dancers. Also, you are involved in other projects to give space to the newcomers, and it's not often happens in dance, especially that we know really well how the European scene works, So how is your feelings after these 10 years, and what do you feel with this new talent or new? Younger creators or dancers are taking this space as a opportunity to meet people and grow.
That's such a large question, Sebastian.
I know. Well, let's make the short answer.
Yeah,
I know that because
I'll try.
because I have a lot of sorry that I interrupt, but also ilDance for you. We talked about that before. It have a lot of emotional aspect of you, of yourself. So I remember the first time we took. You came to the BIDE in 2015. Some of your dances, but when we met in Valencia, we have a meeting in, I think, 2016, if my memory don't works bad. And it was the first time that we talked in person, because we was exchanging email for a while. And I saw for the very first time that we met in person that you have a really strong emotional connection that I can have also with BIDE.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, maybe that's the link to working with younger people. Well, I have to say that ilDance has been changing and is changing and will continue to change. I think the struggle, and you maybe know it, when the organization grows, is that there's a certain expectation from stakeholders, and maybe sometimes even from the community, that the organization will keep on sort of realizing or delivering same things because it's the same organization, so-called. And I think for both Lee and myself, one of the most important things to remind ourselves is that despite certain expectations that are imposed, perhaps upon us, we can still change, even if the change can be a little bit challenging or difficult. That we cannot freeze. We cannot freeze the projects. We cannot freeze the ideas. We cannot freeze the organization. It's very dynamic. The fluidity that I am experiencing in my own life is also very much sort of the the virtue of ilDance. And we are nomadic people. We are a nomadic organization. We are very, sometimes I say that ilDance is a non-organized organization because it's very particular, it's very meticulous, it's very diligent, it's very precise, it's very professional, it's all of these things. But it's not organized in boxes. We don't try to put ourselves in boxes in order to create stability. We're looking for stability in movement. And this is why I keep speaking about how we don't direct the organization, we choreograph the organization. Because as choreographers, we know how movement can be constant. We don't need to stop moving to create a constant. The constant is within the movement is within the constant. So we are choreographing the organization, and the same kind of methodologies that we use in making dance work is the way that we also make the organization be what it is. The work with young artists for me, so we actually produced a documentary film called Notice, Claim, Repurpose with Caroline Hegg, the filmmaker following our junior company in 2021, last year. And I think one of the opening sentences that Caroline decided to use in the film is that me saying that I feel that as a queer individual, it's almost my duty to work with young people who are at this point, from my perspective, the way that I perceive the reality in which young artists are being fostered in the system is doing everything that it can to murder their creativity.
Totally.
There was actually a person, he passed not so long ago, Ken Robinson, who was an education professor and spoke about The Element. It's a very good book, actually, called The Element by him. And there's a lot of TED Talks. Actually, I think that his first TED Talk was the most watched TED Talk ever. So a lot of people might already know it. But Ken Robinson spoke a lot about how the education system is completely the opposite to what a system needs to be if it is actually about encouraging creativity. The education system that we are operating on is precisely about stopping people from being creative so they can fit into the system, so they can get a job, so they can work in the system. So the education system teaches them how to be a useful part of society. So it's not about challenging the system, it's about maintaining the system. So when we work with young artists, and I think in the last 10 years, it's become very extreme. And probably a combination of capitalism just becoming stronger and deeper, neoliberalism being the reality in which they grow up, speaking about the next generation, and the immediacy of information accessibility through social media and the internet. They, on one hand, become more passive, and on the other hand, the system is kind of appropriating their passivity. So the system tells them, you don't have to think, we will think for you. So the individual is not thinking. And the individual takes for granted what the system basically is indoctrinating them into. So there are young artists who are thinking that there's a certain way that they need to think, behave, and live in order to become artists, in order to become professional artists, including this nonsense that you have to go to university to become an artist. Why? What does the university have to do with art? Nothing. Like that nonsense is just one of the foundations that are very important to understand, that there's a lot of value in going to university, but you don't have to go to university to become an artist. And you don't become an artist simply by going to university. You have to work. You have to ask yourself questions. You have to deal with discomfort. You have to deal with stimuli and triggers and all of these things that make you question reality as such, and make you question your past, and make you question your present, and demanding from yourself to actually do things that are maybe not already there. So you have to invent. You can't just go and take courses and then somehow magically you will become an artist. This is not how it works. So that passive role that individuals are taking, and at the same time, they learn that they can demand from the system to serve them. So there's also a lot of educations, and I don't know how it is everywhere, but in a lot of places that I've been and I've been working, education has been privatized. So the students are customers. And as we know in capitalism, the customer is always right. So these
Totally.
students who are basically going into an institution that is supposed to support them in the process of finding their artistic voice or refining their artistic voice is actually telling them that what they know is already the most important thing. So there's no room for challenging. There's no room for questioning. There's no room for investigation. There's no room for research. There's no room for all of these really important things. And the practice becomes secondary. People think that practice is something you learn. Practice is what you practice. You practice the practice. You work the work. You dance the dance. You do the deeds. You have to do the doing. You can't learn about it, especially when it comes to dance. The only way to learn how to dance is to dance. You can't learn of it. You can't read a book about it. The practice is the practice. If, a few years ago, I actually was supposed to start a PhD, speaking about universities. And a friend of mine said, what you're going to do is what your PhD is going to be. If you're going to spend time reading a book, your PhD is going to be a book. If you're going to spend time researching movement, your PhD is going to be movement. All of these things are possibilities. But that idea that the education system is built to support artists is wrong from the start. Because if you go into an institution that is based on the same education system that is teaching people how to become engineers, then you can't expect to become a radical, rebellious, avant-garde, innovative artist. So I think this is, and again, when you go back to how we started the conversation, I said that when I went to school, I learned from artists. I didn't learn from academics. And just the other day, a friend of mine spoke to me about it, how her teachers, because she's doing a master's, her teachers are people who've never practiced. They went from school to BA, to do masters, to do a PhD, and now they're teaching in universities, but they've never practiced.
Well, this is why people like us are so interested in sharing practices, because it's an endless place to learn, from my point of view.
And I think it's important that I just want to stress that there's a lot of value in studies. And like I said,
come on. Yeah.
I want to do a PhD. I want to go very deep into the theoretical and the academic aspect of my practice, even though my PhD is going to be practice-led. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand that these are not the same thing. They can be conducive, they can support each other, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I agree that they need to feed each other in a way,
Yeah.
And go on.
No, I just wanted to say that I had a very interesting conversation with some young artists during the pandemic. It was such a big hit for them. People graduated universities and were basically waiting for that moment to go out to the world and get their jobs and start their projects. And then for 2 years, they couldn't do much. So there was a lot of frustration in that community. And someone said something about how they don't have a job, or they don't have, and then they started sort of using the word job and work interchangeably. And I kind of stopped them for a moment, and I wanted to make a very clear distinction between how they might not have a job as an artist, but artists always have work. We always have work, because we always work at what we do, whether it's reading a book or writing text or looking through a video or walking on the street and noticing the sounds of the leaves in harmony with the sound of the bus passing and making a mental note that then later will be translated into something in the studio. And then our interaction with people and our kinesthetic acknowledgement of our space and all of these things, we always work. And it's important that I think young artists understand that this is part of the work. The way that you listen to the world is also going to impact the way that you move when you perform. The way that you train your eyes to notice visual information is going to influence the way that you're going to move when you perform. And all of these things, and you know how you stretch the strings of your heart and your emotional capacity is part of who you are as an artist. Not how high your mark is on the essay that you wrote in your school. That's not going to make you a performer, a maker, whatever you choose to do.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think it's super nice that you make this deep reflection, because I mean, from my point of view, that I have also the chance to collaborate and work with young creators and young dancers or choreographers or artists in general. But I feel like this sub 28 year generations, they are coming with a new narrative, you know, and they question the system that you was super well described, you know, because of course have much more many aspects, but you focus in a super interesting place of how the educational system work with the practice system, and also so I don't want to say that I have faith, because I'm not religious, but they are coming with a new narrative. I don't know if you felt the same interacting with young creators, but this is what I was taking this year so far.
You know, never say never. It's never all or nothing. I'm of course. I mean, also the world there's
Shifting,
just so much going on.
Yeah.
I mean, like within the last year, like between the pandemic and war and terrorism and human rights and the weather and the climate changing and like all of these things that are happening, you know, if you have your senses open, it makes you want to react, or if you don't want to react, you have some kind of reaction. So of course it's also very overwhelming.
Totally.
But those of us who actually have a, let's say, desire or passion towards the corporeal experience, then might find outlets in corporeal means. But I do think that a lot of people, and I don't want to make too much of a generational distinction, but I think a lot of people feel like they participate in the world through their keyboard and what they write on social media, rather than actually having empirical, tangible, visceral experiences in the world.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Yes. I think experience needs to be something physical, you know, and emotional, and technology, of course, can help to find the places or the people or whatever in a project that you can be attached to, but you need to be there, you know.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, for closing, because you touched some of my other questions that I was prepared, but you say something earlier about the age, and we usually finish our conversation about the future, and soon you'll be 40, you know. So how you see the next years of yourself, you know, knowing that you entered in a new decade and with so many things going on in your personal and your professional life.
At the moment, I have to say that I'm really trying to witness myself witnessing the life that I'm experiencing. I think of life as an experience, so it's actually interesting that you said what you just said earlier. I think of life as an experience. It's just an experience. So I'm thinking about myself witnessing that experience, and then starting to think about meaning, significance, and I hope that I will be able to Continue to let go of the pressure that I think a lot of us feel when we do what we do in the communities and societies that we do, either because we are underestimated or because we are overestimated, because both of them are coming with a lot of pressure. Those who think that artists are the ones who are supposed to change the world, and those who think that artists are irrelevant. From both directions, there's a lot of pressure. And I think it's good for us to be amongst people like us, to actually practice some compassion and solidarity and support each other in letting go of that pressure. And I think that if you are in your 40s and above and you're still doing it, then you've been persevering, because it's not easy to get to that point. I'm very, very excited about what's going to unfold, because there's a certain momentum in my experience that is exciting. There's a lot of things on the plate that I'm looking forward to nibble on. there's a lot of interesting bites to take. And I actually, one of the things that I would wish to myself is have even more opportunities to learn. I think the more I learn, the more I realize how much I want to learn. Learn, study, experience, all of these things. I think we are really just scratching the surface when it comes to consciousness and corporeality and multiversality, and there's so much still to do before we go to the virtual, before we go to the digital, before we go to this cyborg, robotic, artificial intelligence. For me, I feel like even though I've been dancing and making dance for 37 years, if we think that I started at the age of 3 to dance in my parents' living room, I still feel like I'm literally just starting. I mean, I'm just starting to kind of get some kind of hint of what it means to have physical experience, what it means to have physical manifestation of that experience that I'm referring to as myself. What is that self of mine, and how is it manifesting in this body? All of these really grand questions that at the same time are really basic. So, it's nice to think about it like changing the lens. Reality might not change in the same speed that we are capable of changing our lens. So if you look at the same thing through a microscope or through a telescope, you would see something completely different. So, yeah, I feel like I would like to gain more lenses so I can see more things.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Israel. It's a pleasure to hear you, to see your deep commitment to your political ideas, and that your practice is not just a practice, have a strong ideology behind. So thank you so much to be with us.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a ti.
Well, this was the 34th chapter of the Barcelona International Dance Exchange B podcast, and see you in the next one.